Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Common Ground, and I'm Jason Downs. Welcome to a place where we can all agree on the important stuff. It's good to have you here. Today is August 10th. Going to be a great show. The topic of conversation will be executive actions, executive orders. What are they? Are they legal? Are they constitutional? Why are they being used so often? What are the politics involved? We have some of our favorite people with us today to partake in this conversation. Mr. Lou Esbin, our lovely legal advisor in residence, friend, mentor, patriot, is here, and we'll be inviting Nolan Rollins to join us after the first break, also a patriot and an attorney, speaking of, as well as an advisor to many politicians over the years. And, of course, we have our very own Matt Denny. We've got a passel of great patriots here today. Matt Denny is our expert accounting advisor in residence and one of our wonderful sponsors as well. Denny and Company, LLP, certified public accountants. They make your life less taxing. Reach out to Matt for all your accounting needs at dennyllp.com or by calling 661-286-8860. That's Denny and Company. They make your life less taxing. So lovely to have you guys here. Lou, Matt, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hello, hello.
Yes, sir.
Hi. So, coronavirus relief. Let's start there, because I feel like all the executive orders over the weekend specifically and in the past week are sort of in response to what's happening regarding the coronavirus relief. So, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell would basically like to inject more money into some level of unemployment insurance and another round of grants and low-interest loans for small businesses, while the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, wants expiring unemployment benefits extended and another set of stimulus checks sent out. This seems to be just sort of a rough idea of what's happening. This has now been going on for a couple of months, back and forth, and it doesn't seem like there's much movement. Here's a quote from Republican strategist Ron Bongine. The challenge is to find the middle ground of what lower funding level conservatives will accept, while at the same time making sure vulnerable Senate Republicans bring home relief to voters that need it. I'm not sure that sweet spot has ever materialized. What do you think? We'll start with the pronounced Republican, Matt Denny. You were a legislator, as we've said many times here in Montana, before starting your business as an accountant. What's your take? What's your take on this? Is it all politics?
Well, that quote you had was certainly all politics. It's not just the motivations of the Republicans and their reelection chances. There's also the motivations of Democrats who don't want to give any credit to Republicans for whatever relief is granted. And so they're both doing a lot of grandstanding right now to try to see who can maneuver into position. And I think that's what these executive orders are. It's just pure politics, meant to try to get the Democrats back to the table, so that it doesn't look like Mr. Trump has, brought home the Christmas presents. Well, I'm sorry, holiday presents.
Election presents, right?
Yeah, there you go.
So, okay, I didn't mean to make it sort of seem more Republican heavy there necessarily, but it does seem like we're at an impasse, and that usually feels like when these executive orders start popping up a little bit more to circumvent Congress. Is that an accurate assessment, Lou?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think he's relying upon the language of the recent Supreme Court decision that struck down his movement to eliminate DACA. It's interesting. I mean, I think the Supreme Court issued a ruling that thought they'd slap him down, and yet he's turned it around and now said, well, the Supreme Court has given me the authority to do this. And look, executive orders really became popular under the Obama administration when nothing got through Mitch McConnell's Iron Curtain, and the Trump administration has just amplified it that much more.
Well, I know that we've talked about McConnell a couple of times, and it's interesting that you bring him up again here. I saw something that said he was basically sitting on 495 different pieces of legislation that the Congress has passed on to the Senate, and mainly bipartisan legislation. Do you feel like that's an accurate assessment, Matt? Just help me out.
Well, I don't know. That sounds like an awful lot of quote-unquote bipartisan bills to ignore. Of course, the definition of bipartisan means, they got a couple of liberal
right.
Republicans to join on. That doesn't make them bipartisan bills. But I haven't done any analysis of what's in the hopper. But it is one of the beauties of our system of government is that we have checks and balances, and it really does, in the end, force people to come back and try to compromise. Unfortunately, we're in the kind of environment with the Congress where they're barely even talking to each other, whereas they used to go to dinner every night or hit the bars together and work these things out. And that's not the case anymore. And it's really sad to me.
So as far as...
But Matt...
Yeah, go ahead.
Matt, where is it in the Constitution that the majority leader of the Senate wields so much control?
I don't know that it's in the Constitution. It would be in the rules of the Senate. And those are come up with by the Senate, who's a semi-sovereign body. The House has similar rules. The Speaker can hold on to any Senate bills that she doesn't like, just as McConnell can do his thing. And it's all in the rules, the cloture rules and all the rest of that. They're not in the Constitution, but they're tradition. And it's a shame that we're at the point where we have government leaders who won't even talk to each other. Especially while they're hurting.
I heard that Trump had not met, or Pelosi had not met with Trump since October. The Speaker of the House has not met with the President since October.
Wow.
That's ridiculous.
I mean, I hear what you're saying, Matt, that it happens on both sides. I'm just reading this as you guys were talking. McConnell appeared on Fox. I think this was back in February, so before the whole pandemic began, or at least before the lockdown. It says many of the bills easily passed the House on many occasions with overwhelming bipartisan support. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell confirmed on Thursday that he is blocking about 400 pieces of legislation that have passed the House and made it clear that he intends to kill every one of them. Speaking to Fox News, it's true they've been on full left-wing parade over there, trotting out all their left-wing solutions that are going to be issues in the fall campaign. We're not going to pass any of those. So that's a direct quote from him back in February.
Well, and don't forget that Mitch McConnell doesn't have this power unilaterally. He serves as leader at the sufferance of the majority of the Senate. And so if the majority of the Senate did not like what he was doing, they would get rid of him. And we've seen that in the past. We've seen leaders and speakers deposed by their own caucuses for all manner of reasons. So, to blame it just on McConnell, yes, he has a lot of power and he holds a lot of purse strings just like Nancy Pelosi does. I find it amusing. I would love to know how many bills Nancy Pelosi's holding up that came from the Senate. Maybe there aren't any, but I suspect there are probably rather a lot. But we're not hearing about that because of politics.
So, I mean, which
bills they
election
want
coming
passed
up
happen to be in the Senate's hands.
So let's talk about executive orders for a second, because all of that is preamble to what happened this weekend. Now, in the past week, there have been many memorandums, which I also had to look up what the difference was, because I know we're familiar with his executive orders since he's come into office, but 6 executive orders just in the past week and 9 presidential memorandums, which weren't exactly executive orders, but were styled as presidential memoranda, which is an increasingly, I guess, common but lesser known expression of presidential power that, as Lou just pointed out, sort of came under popularity with Obama. So just a couple definitions here. A presidential memoranda is essentially an executive order by another name, yet still has some unique qualities. An executive order is an official document by which the president manages the federal government. An executive order is an official, legally binding mandate passed down from the president to federal agencies under the executive branch. They're not laws. So as such, they don't fall under the purview of Congress, which is the whole point, right, Lou? Which is what you were saying.
Right.
So where does the line, I guess, get crossed as far as legality and certainly as far as constitution, being constitutional? In your mind,
that's the question. Is like the House has control of the purse strings, right? Not the president. And you look at some of the executive orders that came out, and they were with respect to the purse. And, Matt and I were talking earlier that this was a brilliant chess move. But the problem is it's at the expense of the Constitution.
It was a brilliant chess move as far as what? The upcoming election? Or
politics, yeah. It was a political chess move.
So, some of these orders, for instance, executive order on aligning federal contracting and hiring practices with the interest of American workers, executive order on improving rural health and telehealth access. I mean, they're all sort of, coronavirus related, and they seem positive. Memorandum on the extension of the use of the National Guard to respond to COVID-19 and to facilitate economic recovery in Texas, a separate one for Florida, a separate one for Connecticut. Executive order on ensuring essential medicines, medical countermeasures, critical inputs, executive order on addressing the threat posed by TikTok, an executive order addressing the threat posed by WeChat, a memorandum on continued student loan payment relief, executive order on fighting the spread of COVID-19 by providing assistance to renters and homeowners. Now all of these, as you say, seem like great political maneuvers because they aim to benefit people, obviously, that need help. The question, I guess, as you just mentioned, can they work if they're not backed by Congress, right? Matt, what do you think?
Well, you gave a list of a number of them. Some of them are more legal than others. In my view. The question becomes, an executive order is supposed to be based on either constitutional delegated power in the executive branch or be based on authority, be based on powers authorized by the Congress. Now, recently, and Lou, correct me if I'm wrong, but recently the Supreme Court said that his executive order diverting money from the Defense Department to building the wall was constitutional. It had been sued against, and I believe they declared that he could do that. I guess the argument being that Congress had appropriated money, and he, as an executive, can redirect it, as national security requires, and he declared an emergency and all that. Now, for him to come along and say, we're going to order all the states, and we're going to provide the money for it, to give an extra $400 a week in unemployment benefits. Well, I don't believe that's been appropriated by Congress. And
it has not.
While we may call ourselves being in a state of emergency, that becomes the question. I mean, does he have the authority to move money from one place to another, no matter, what mood he's in, or is there some sort of a litmus test that has to be followed? And I don't know whether they put that in. The Supreme Court had any tests like that they're applying to these yet. Lou would probably have a better idea of that. But part of that executive order on the unemployment also included relief for evictions for renters. Mm-hmm. Well, buried in the fine print is, and this is because that's all the authority he has, it's limiting evictions in federally funded housing.
Correct.
Or federal assisted housing. And so, and that, I suppose they have the power to do as a federal government. Whether or not he has the power to make that declaration is another matter, although that seems like a fairly, benign use of his executive powers in an emergency. But the $400 a week, that seems to be a bit over the top. And I think he knows that. I think the administration knows that, and they're doing it to get Pelosi back to the table. Because right now, if this goes through, then he looks like the good guy passing out candy, and everyone wants to pass out the candy, so they can all take credit for it. Meanwhile, the taxpayers are getting screwed, but that's a whole other issue.
Well, I mean, but so you're essentially saying that it's an empty order, an empty document, because it doesn't have the Congress backing it financially. And, based on what I read in the fine print, it looks like they would have to come up with an entirely new system, since it is outside Congress authorization. They'd have to come up with a whole new system of how to disperse this new aid. And as you mentioned, it's completely dependent upon states agreeing to foot part of the bill, 25% of the bill. And they're already in dire straits. So I see what you mean by saying that it's strictly a maneuver to sort of get the Democrats back at the table. So what were you going to say, Lou? It sounded like you were about to say something.
No, he also had something on student loans.
Yes.
And okay, does he? I guess it falls within his authority to regulate his agencies. But then again, it goes to, recovering money that is due to the government on those student loans. Look, I'm the first one to say that there needs to be, vast student loan reforms. But I just don't think it's through executive orders.
Well, the student loans, actually, that executive order seemed like it might actually be the one that is the simplest and most direct and could actually deliver results, because it said that this is the only area of the four which doesn't need funding from Congress or state governments or private sectors to fully implement. The memorandum directs the Education Department to extend the student loan relief granted in the CARES Act until the end of the year. Currently, loan payments are paused and interest is suspended on federally held student loans until September 30. So,
and Jason, remember as well that an executive order stands until a court says it doesn't, or until Congress overrules it, perhaps with a veto majority.
Or a subsequent executive order.
Or another executive order. Cancels.
That's how we got DACA. And
right.
I don't recall. Was he able to overturn DACA, Lou? I thought he was not.
So the Supreme Court did not allow him to do that, but when they issued their decision, they left. They said, I don't remember exactly what they said, but they said certain things that seemed to have given him a loophole to issue more executive orders.
Yeah, well, one would think that an executive order by one president would be reversible by another president. And so it's not
law
going to let him do it in this case. Then they would probably prescribe a set of tests to allow it. So I wish I'd read up on that. That's fascinating.
Well, we'll talk some more about this. We're going to take a quick break here with Matt Denny and Lou Esbin. We're going to invite attorney Nolan Rollins into the conversation as well. We're going to talk about patriotism as well when we come back and what it means to us in 2020. So keep it right here, and we'll be right back on KHTS 98.1 FM and AM 1220.
You see so much when you look at your child. A creative spirit that surprises you every day. Curiosity that develops into exploring unique passions. A little leader growing every day to discover who they are, what they love, and how they can make their mark on the world. At SCVI, we see those same amazing things. Our tuition-free K-12 charter school gives your child boundless opportunities to think critically and imagine freely, with a customized learning program built around each individual student. As iLead's founding school, SCVI combines an immersive approach to traditional subject learning with extracurricular activities including STEAM, robotics, theater, music, and sports. SCVI has the only international baccalaureate program in Santa Clarita, with a 10-year proven track record of graduates excelling at top universities. And we're in your backyard, just off the 5 freeway in West Santa Clarita Valley in Castaic. For enrollment information or to learn more about our program, including homeschool options, visit iLeadSantaClarita.org. iLead Schools, free to think, inspired to lead.
We all know sometimes people lose their way. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, the Way Out Recovery SCV may have the answers you've been waiting for. The Way Out is the premier intensive outpatient treatment center serving Santa Clarita. Asking for help is the first step. Call The Way Out today, 661-296-4444. That's 296-4444 for a private free assessment. The Way Out is an accredited, affordable outpatient program that accepts most insurance. Call us at 661-296-4444 or check us out online at thewayoutrrecoveryscv.com. Quit battling with yourself. Ask The Way Out for help today.
Hi, I'm Eric Goldhurst, Head of Operations for Burger King North America. Throughout this time, we've taken steps to take care of our guests.
And since we know many of your jobs have been affected by this crisis,
we want to help make sure you're taken care of too.
If you are looking for work, we are hiring.
And there's a spot on our team for you.
We know that we'll get through this together, as long as we keep taking care of each other.
For more information, call 253-3283. That's 253-3283.
Your hometown station. KHTS.
Welcome back to Common Ground. This is Jason Downs, where we can all agree on the important stuff. I've been talking about executive orders and executive memorandums and politics within the House and the Senate in regards to coronavirus relief and the resulting orders that Trump made this past weekend and hopes to bring the Democrats back to the table, possibly, or win some votes, possibly. We're discussing all of that. So let me introduce Mr. Nolan Rollins. Hey, when in doubt, always add another attorney to the mix, right? Isn't that what they say?
I think only an attorney said that.
It's great to have you back, Nolan. Nolan is an attorney and CEO of SmartMouth, which is a sports-related tech company. Rollins is the former president and CEO of the Los Angeles and New Orleans Urban League. He's also the former chairman of the New Orleans Airport Board and member of the Los Angeles International Airport Board of Commissioners. Rollins has advised members of the House of Representatives, the Senate. He's advised governors and mayors throughout the nation for over 15 years. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you for having me back on.
So, what are your thoughts about the motivations within Congress and within the Senate to block relief to Americans and essentially Trump stepping in and appearing to save the day with these executive orders. Do you have any thoughts and opinions?
You know, it's interesting. I mean, I think we are watching federalism and the boundaries of federalism being tested consistently, daily, whether it be through executive orders or whether it would be through the appropriation process or lack thereof of appropriation that's making it to the communities. But, you know, I think the challenge is we're playing so loose and heavy with politics right now that the work of the people is rarely being moved. So everything at this point really seems like who is political gamesmanship and political one-upsmanship and proclamations being made of things that quite frankly, federalism says that can't be done. And so it's an interesting time, but the unfortunate part for the average American is that it's more noise than it is pragmatic or practical opportunities for them to live their lives, to pay their rent, to keep their lights on, to keep their jobs, to keep their families safe. So, and that's the struggle, the challenge. That's the challenge. At some point, I would just want us all, both left-leaning and right-leaning, to get to the work of the people and as opposed to the work of politics.
Do you feel like, and I'll put this question to Lou and Matt as well. Let's start with Matt. Do you feel like this is unusual? We've asked this question many times before. Do you feel like this is unusual? We can absolutely agree that a pandemic is unusual. These are extraordinary times. And we were all hoping going in that this would not be the case. We wouldn't find ourselves in the situation that Nolan just described. But here we are. And I'm wondering where it goes. Is there a precedent? What are your thoughts, Matt?
Well, in my lifetime, it seems to me that this all started in about 1992 with the election of Bill Clinton. And each of the parties have gradually grown further and further apart and less willing to compromise or work together on a vast array of issues. Sometimes they'll get together, but, you know, for example, after 9/11, they got together and created the Homeland Security Department, which, to my mind, was both parties doing something bad to the people. we still have all of these invasions of privacy going on, so they can in a bipartisan fashion, they're able to give themselves more power and more money. But when it comes to actually accomplishing anything, you know, constructive, we have less and less of that going on, and I don't know how you fix it other than to turn to a third party and nudge these guys back onto the road we're supposed to be on.
I want to start edging this toward patriotism as well, because I was having this conversation with my mother-in-law over the weekend, and she was saying, you know, I've noticed that I feel like neighbors and friends have sort of branded themselves as patriots. They've, you know, taken the flag and you know, et cetera, et cetera. And she's like, I'm gonna put my Biden sign on my lawn, and I'm gonna hang a flag, you know, my American flag out right next to it, and try and take back some of this. And for some reason, what you just said, Matt, reminded me of that. And I just feel like these people are acting in their interest, in keeping their jobs, in saving their face, et cetera, instead of doing what's best for the American people. Lou, what are your thoughts based on what Matt said and what I just said?
Well, no, I agree, and I want to follow up with what Nolan said, was that, you know, there are all these things going on, and the American public just sees it as politics. But I think those of us, at least the four of us that are on this call, see it as an erosion of the Constitution. And then to your point about, you know, patriotism, you're right. It seems like one party and its constituents have taken the mantle or the banner of patriotism as their own and vilified the other side of the aisle. And I don't know how you shift that around. I mean, to me, someone is patriotic who upholds and defends the Constitution of the United States. I think that's the definition of a patriot. And if you're doing things that are unconstitutional, or you're not doing things that are in the best interest of the electorate and the republic, are you a patriot? I don't know.
So listen to this. I've never read before actually doing research for this show. I had never gone to whitehouse.gov and read any executive orders, etc. I've gotten bits and pieces through news articles over the years, etc. But I've never actually gone and looked at them. And today, Nolan, I want to hear your reaction to that and this, based on exactly what we're saying. This was the verbiage used within a presidential memorandum. So this is under Section 1 policy. Protective measures enacted by states and localities across the country to prevent loss of life from COVID-19 have resulted in millions of Americans becoming unemployed and in need of assistance. My administration, recognizing the acute financial distress affecting families across the country, has worked to quickly provide billions of dollars in relief to supplement unemployment benefits and help businesses keep their workers employed, in addition to zeroing federal student loan interest and delaying tax day. In total, nearly $3 trillion has been appropriated for emergency funding. Because many of the relief programs created by the Congress have expired or will shortly expire, my administration and the Republican leadership in the United States Senate have proposed multiple options to continue to proceed needed relief to Americans. But Democratic members of Congress have twice blocked temporary extensions of supplemental unemployment benefits. Political games that harm American lives are unacceptable, especially during a global pandemic, and therefore I am taking action to provide financial security to Americans. This is the actual verbiage on the federal website. This particular one wasn't an executive order, it was an executive memorandum, but still, I was really surprised by the sort of informal and very partisan language in an official federal release. What are your thoughts, Nolan?
So I think if that doesn't pique your ears or strike a person as odd, then we're really not paying attention to what America is supposed to be. Let's be really clear. That's political messaging. What you just read could come out of any PR spin house in Washington, D.C. on K Street right now, and it will be great fodder for political messaging. And what it doesn't do is it doesn't move an agenda of the people. And I think what it does is it continues to entrench this, I'm in my corner. If you don't come to my corner, I'm only going to talk about you. And the real challenge is over time, and it's interesting that Matt mentioned what he mentioned just from when Clinton was in, and the challenge with civility. So this is supposed to be a representative democracy. And in a representative democracy, the people are supposed to be able to tell their representatives what to do. What we've watched over time is that, quote unquote, the people have gotten smaller and smaller to where it's entrenched interest as opposed to population. And it's entrenched interests who have a real interest, a specific way of things happening in a way of governing that is beneficial to what their small minority interest is. And
which just let me interject, was something we were talking about just a moment ago in regards to Mitch McConnell, because he's always in this tough spot of passing legislation which election experts say is needed. For instance, back when we were talking about the Russian meddling and stuff, and the legislation we were trying to pass, and risk sparking the president's disapproval, right, or block the legislation and risk increased Russian election interference and public ridicule. Anyway, go on.
Well, I think it's a big point, right? But that's exactly what these folks are elected for, to be leaders. Not to be leaders with convenience, but to be leaders 24 hours a day. And if that leadership requires you to make a specific point at someone who's in your party, and I could care less what party you're in, Democrat, Republican, Independent, Green, I don't really care. If you are, in fact, going to be a leader in this country, leadership requires you to do so 24 hours a day. And I think what's happening at this point, it's just an echo chamber. And if it continues to be an echo chamber, nothing is going to get done. People are going to continue to be strapped economically. No decisions are really going to be made. And what is inevitably going to happen is that these decisions will, at their core, fall back to the local level. And the local level is just not equipped financially or from a large-scale movement of operational needs to be able to do this. So what we are literally going to watch as more and more things are not done is more people losing jobs, more people dying, fewer decisions being made, because we are seeing a lack of leadership. And I think until the representative individuals, more people are pushing this agenda where they're pushing everyone into the middle of the room and saying, you will represent us, it's going to be a challenge, because left to their own devices, these are going to do what they're doing right now. And that's nothing.
Well, is their doing nothing really them doing nothing, or is it a political impasse? Is it, like we've been saying, these people want to save face, or these people want to be the ones handing out the candy, or these people, is that what we're seeing? Is that the reason why they're quote-unquote doing nothing?
So I'll just say this, from my vantage point, doing nothing is absolutely doing, and that something has a negative impact on the people who are in most need.
Okay.
So doing nothing is absolutely doing something. It is harming people every single day. And I don't know. Yeah, in action, absolutely. And being really candid, the political points that one would win with their small constituency for saying no or yes to something, absolutely, mine mean nothing, because those small political points aren't enough to get a majority to do anything. So while your three friends may be happy that you're towing a party line and saying what you want them, and you're saying what they want you to say, the reality is what you want to get done is never going to get done, because you're only representing your three friends.
And this goes back to something we've talked about before too that I wanted to bring up today. And Matt and Lou, you can address this. Is term limits, right? We've talked about how old Pelosi is. We talked about she's I believe 80 and Mitch McConnell is 78. These people are the folks in charge, holding up these bills, holding up legislation, blocking legislation, sitting and putting it in a drawer. They're essentially affecting a great deal of our lives, and they're 80 years old. Now, I'm not saying anything's wrong with that. But I think there is something to say for limiting terms. Lou, what do you think? Would that go any distant in helping this issue at large?
I'm not on term limits. I think that California has proven that it's a disaster, because what it does is it allows lobbyists to have way too much control and increases the power of the bureaucracy over the elected official. But I do think that, just as the Constitution says, there needs to be a minimum age to be elected to office. Maybe it's time to look at a maximum age. I mean, I don't think that at the time the Constitution was enacted, the average age was a lot less. I don't think they ever thought that we would live as long as they do, or nor do I think they thought that people would stay in office as long as they do. So maybe it's time to talk about, just like there's, 65 years old is retirement in some industries, maybe we need to talk about that. Maybe there needs to be an age at where these people just have to.
So rather than term limits, an age limit. Matt, what do you think? We got another minute before we need to take a quick break.
Well, we already have term limits. They're called elections. And if the district the Pelosi represents didn't want her in, they'd put her ass out. And this all comes down to, we absolutely get the government we deserve, not the government we wish for. We wish all the time, but we keep voting these votes in. And until that stops, nothing's going to change.
Well, I keep asking Nolan to run, but we'll take a quick break. We'll talk more about that in a moment, as well as patriotism a little bit further. So I've got Nolan Rollins, I've got Matt Denny, I've got Lou Esbin. Stay right here with us on Common Ground. I'm Jason Downs. This is KHTS 98.1 FM, AM 1220.
Best live theater can be found right here in the Santa Clarita Valley. The Canyon Theater Guild has been entertaining audiences for decades with top-quality musicals and plays. Located on Main Street at Olds for the young actor in your family. For more information, call the box office at 799-2702 or go online to canyontheater.org.
Social distancing slows the spread of coronavirus, so we should all stay home to lower the risk for everyone. More info at coronavirus.gov. Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Your hometown station.
Our news team at KHTS is constantly working to keep you informed. If you want the latest and greatest information on the Santa Clarita Valley, just sign up for the KHTS newsletter. SCV news delivered directly to your email inbox every weekday by 5 p.m. and a special weekend edition on Sundays. All it takes is an email address and you're set. Go to hometownstation.com to register.
98.1 FM and AM 1220.
I listen to it all day, every day.
Hometown, your hometown station.
And We're back. It's Jason Downs. You're listening to Common Ground on KHTS. I have some wonderful guests today. Nolan Rollins, Matt Denny, Lou Esbin. True patriots, in my opinion. True patriot. Have any of you guys served in the military? Because that's, I guess, what we got first and foremost, right, when we think of patriots. Matt, I know you reenact.
Well, at one I attempted to study, but that didn't work, so no, I didn't serve.
Okay. Nolan, do you serve?
I have not either. I'm from a military family. My father has been in the Army for 34 years. Older brother, Navy, younger brother, Marine. So very military family. I was the only one that kind of just took the educational route.
So they look at you as less of a patriot because you didn't serve?
No.
No.
You know, here's the irony of all ironies is that my father said to me, when he left to go to Desert Storm and I left to go to college the same exact year, he said, we're both about to go serve. Everything we do over the time that we spend learning is about service to someone else. And when I became the CEO at the Urban League, he said, now's your time to serve. So,
Yeah. So one of the things, aside from sort of has now been associated with the Republican Party, there's a confusion of nationalism, right? So I like reading definitions here. Patriotism or national pride is the feeling of love, devotion, and a sense of attachment to a homeland and alliance with other citizens who share the same sentiment. Now, that to me sounds like such a beautiful thing. Love, devotion, sense of attachment, pride, alliance. And yet, all the things we've been talking about today, you wouldn't use those words to describe any of what's happening. So how do you think that this switch occurred? I mean, I know that's an impossible question to answer. I'm just sort of, putting it out there. But this switch occurred. I know Matt, referenced the 90s, and yes, we've certainly seen a lot. I feel like social media has aided and abetted. But we see this happening. And also this idea of nationalism. In most contexts today, nationalism is the policy or doctrine of asserting the interests of one's own nation viewed as separate from the interests of other nations or the common interest of all nations. So nationalism is a kind of excessive or aggressive patriotism. This is from dictionary.com. Listen to this. Modern nationalism is rooted in part in French and American revolutions that fought for the sovereignty of their people over monarchies. This historic nationalism is generally viewed favorably, a cornerstone of Western liberalism and democracy. However, fascist regimes have merged the fervor of nationalism with the notions of superiority, especially when it comes to ethnicity and religion. In such context, patriots can become those who happen to agree with you or look like you, and traitors, those who do not. This form of nationalism is what happens when patriotism gets out of hand and morphs into something more exclusionary, isolationist, and, chauvinist. That is from the dictionary, which I also find amazing. So what are your thoughts, Lou? Sounds like you liked that as much as I did.
Well, it's interesting. It's a dictionary definition. Of course, someone would say, well, dictionaries are written by the liberal side of society, right?
Interesting.
I mean, nationalism taken too far can become dangerous. But I think there's a difference between nationalism and patriotism in the 21st century.
What do you think? What do you think the difference is?
I think that if I was going to, my first reaction is that sometimes nationalism is at the expense of our Constitution. And I think the Constitution is at the heart of patriotism.
Beautifully said. Matt, what do you think?
Well, I was looking, knew a lot about patriotism and nationalism, and part of what is that patriotism is of its nature defensive, both militarily and culturally. Nationalism, on the other hand, is inseparable from the desire for power. The guiding purpose of every nationalist is to secure more power, more prestige, not for himself, but the nation or other unit in which he's chosen to sink his own individuality. So it's like I said, it's a chauvinistic approach to things.
No, I love that. Patriotism unites and nationalism divide.
It can. Well, nationalism can also unite, as we saw with in the 30s. It united some people to do bad things, actually.
So very bad things.
Not always a good thing, but.
And I think what you have is you wind up having these purity tests that actually challenge the original definitions of things. And they, in some respects, they bastardized the original definitions. I mean, they moved it through a lens that's about the purity of the speaker. So oftentimes we're talking about patriotism from a particular individual's bent on what they believe patriotism is. Some believe that it's patriotic to burn the flag. Some believe that it's not patriotic to burn the flag. Some believe that protest is patriotic. Others don't believe. So you wind up having this interesting game of cat and mouse with what is patriotic and what isn't patriotic by virtue of the person who's saying it. And I think that nationalism has the same to it. There's nothing wrong with loving our country. I love our country. Wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the world. Does it need work? Absolutely. But I still wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the world.
Agreed.
But I'm not saying that we're better than anyone else. I'm saying we're on our own American journey while other countries are on their own journey. So I think we got to be careful because inevitably these words wind up becoming two sides of a battlefield unnecessarily. And we spend more time fighting about who has the purest definition and who has ownership of patriotism or nationalism as opposed to fixing the challenges that we have in front of us.
And that's what I'm getting at, because I feel like you're right. It goes back to the definition, that feeling of love, devotion, and a sense of attachment to the homeland and alliance with other citizens. And that is what I want to come back to. That is what I want to draw all of this back to, because I feel like that, especially now during the coronavirus pandemic, is what we need. We need alliance. We need love. We need devotion to the nation as a whole. And I just am struggling to see it in these executive orders, like the one I just read. There's no talk of love, devotion, or alliance in there. And I'm certainly not seeing it, in this political battle back and forth in Congress or the Senate. We've got 2 minutes left. Lou, anything you'd like to say?
Well, I just think that as the government spends more and more and more money, it has been shown that leads to more and more people grabbing for more and more power and for that money. And I think we're seeing that. I mean, look, $3 trillion, how much they spend? $3 trillion, $8 trillion? God, $1 trillion. You and I can't begin to fathom how many quarters that is. So I think it's just spending all this money amidst this political environment we're in is just a bad combination, I think.
That was Lou Esbin, one of our wonderful sponsors, the law offices of Lou Esbin. When experience counts, count on experience. Go to esbinlaw.com. 35 years serving the Santa Clarita Valley. Thank you so much, Lou, for being here. Thank you, Matt Denny, as always. And Nolan Rollins, absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Join me next week to continue the conversation. As always, the focus on ability and stay positive.